I'm Mark Allen, on your side investigating seatbelts on school buses. Tonight, crash results you have to see to believe.
And administrators find a loaded gun stashed above a school ceiling tile the student police believe is responsible. But first tonight, an exclusive 2 News investigation. Good evening, everyone. I'm Michelle Kingsfield.
And I'm Mark Allen. For the past several months now, we've been asking drivers, educators, students, safety experts, and lawmakers one controversial question. Should there be lap shoulder seatbelts on all Ohio school buses? As you're about to see, the answers are complex, especially when time and money seem to matter so much.
3, 2, 1.
This crash test happened faster than you can blink your eye. In less than 1/1000th of a second, a violent impact as the sled carrying 5 dummies smashes into a barrier at 30 miles an hour. These dummies are the height and weight of 10 and 12-year-olds who are not restrained by lap shoulder seatbelts. In slow motion, you can see the brutal effects of the collision. Some dummies go airborne, launch like rag dolls. Others stay in their seat, crumpled after their heads strike the seat in front of them. It is a terrifying simulation.
When children have a lap and shoulder belt on, they stay inside the seating compartment. They're not tossed around like shoes in a dryer.
James Johnson speaks with authority. He's Vice President of Business Development for IMMI, the world's largest maker of child restraint components, headquartered in Westfield, Indiana. Johnson says 9,000 to 17,000 children are hurt inside school buses each year, a number he believes seatbelts can slash by up to 45%.
Each of these crash test dummies is equipped with instrumentation in the head, the neck, the chest, and in the femurs.
One of Johnson's many partners is Jim Chinney, VP of Quality. Chinney was my guide in the moments after the crash test.
Had these been 5 living, breathing kids, what kind of injuries might we have been looking at after what we just saw?
We've not actually done the calculations yet on this test, but when we've done similar tests in the past, generally we see that, again, compartmentalization works, so I would expect to see pretty reasonable and very survivable injuries for the person that remains inside the compartment. Once you're outside the compartment, all bets are off.
And although he's seen this test hundreds of times, Chinney's first thought is always the same.
As a parent, as I look at child test dummies like these, I see my kids in that. And if I can hold those dummies in that protective compartmentalization, if I could hold my kids in that compartmentalization, then we've done our job as best we can.
Just what is compartmentalization? It's the very foundation of modern school bus crash safety. The seats are the key. They are 20 to 24 inches high and spaced very close together. They are also padded with energy-absorbing material and anchored securely to the floor. In the event of an accident, children who are seated in the perfect position and facing forward are protected. They strike the padded seat in front of them with their head, arms, legs, and chest.
It's a little bit like eggs in an egg carton. As long as the eggs stay in the egg carton and in the foam structure, the soft structure that's around there, eggs are usually fine.
But what if the eggs come out of the carton, like when children come out of their seats in a rollover crash? This is video from 2003 inside a Circleville, Ohio bus. Keep your eye on the children as the bus rolls. It is an unforgettable sight, even after you find out the children you see here all escaped serious injury.
Compartmentalization works pretty well when kids are inside the compartment. It's when kids may be out of position, maybe they're talking to their friends behind them, or maybe hanging out into the aisle, or if there's a sort of a crash event which leads kids out of that compartment, that's when kids are in danger.
And that's what this crash test by IMMI shows. A rollover scenario in which the unbelted dummies become human missiles ramming the roof with their heads. This scenario, while rare, is lethal. Just last June, a Zanesville kindergartner, 6-year-old Casey King, died when his bus veered off a Muskingum County road on its way to King's Elementary School. King was the first child to die inside an Ohio school bus in 22 years. However, the damage to other students is much more contemporary. Just this past January, a Connecticut high school junior died when the bus he was on plunged off I-84. And in 2006, 2 Texas high school soccer players died when their bus toppled. Their driver, who swerved to avoid an accident, ended up crashing into a ditch. But despite evidence from crash tests and that Circleville video, many superintendents and transportation directors we surveyed here in the Dayton area oppose seatbelts on buses. They feel like the buses are already safe enough and feel that lap shoulder belts would strain their already tight budgets.
The question is always at the expense of what? Any new program, any new safety feature we put into our buildings or our buses, something has to give. if.
Brad Nevin is superintendent of Eaton Schools, a district that covers 117 square miles. His bus drivers log 1 million miles a year. Nevin fears adding buses with lap shoulder belts means fewer children per bus, a factor that could be a real budget buster.
Just off the top of my head, I'd have to say we'd have to increase our transportation budget overall by a third. Another concern is, would we have to put aids on the buses to make sure that the students are buckled up safely?
Beyond money, Nevin has this worry.
The more that our buses have to sit on a road, on a country road, for instance, on a foggy or a dark morning, the greater they're at risk of getting hit by someone who can't see them as they're coming down around a turn or over a hill.
To illustrate the point, Karen Jefferson, the Eaton Transportation Supervisor and veteran bus driver, took us to a perilous stop and laid out this scenario.
The driver would now have to find a way to get out of this seat, turn this bus off, take the key, walk back to the seat, let the child out of the seat belt, have him come up, get out.
Jefferson has one more worry. She wonders what would happen to students buckled in lap shoulder belts if the bus was on fire.
Where we're doing evacuation drills in less than a minute, it would take 2. And that's not good because a fire in a bus can spread fast.
Let's say it's a rollover, a fire, God forbid. We need to get these kids off the bus as quickly as possible. That if they were belted in and unconscious, it might actually slow the rescue process. Is there any truth to that?
No, that's an entire myth.
If I have a child that is conscious, if I have a child that it can walk around, if I have a child that is not seriously injured, they can get off the bus much more quickly than a child that maybe has a very serious or grave injury that's involved.
Everybody would be left in the seat.
Back at IMMI, Jim Chinney and James Johnson continue to drive home one point to doubting superintendents and bus drivers.
Well, I think as an administrator, it's peace of mind. It's knowing that you've done everything you can to get children to school safe, home from school safe, and to all their activities the best way you know how.
And that is another point of concern. Bus drivers aren't just on routes to and from school these days. They're on highways at higher speeds on longer trips, which may put drivers and passengers at greater risk of rollover and side impact accidents.
Wow, some amazing pictures there. Certainly sobering for any parent. But what about federal safety experts? What are they saying about all this?
Well, in this particular case, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration is the expert. It has tested buses and seatbelts many times since the 1970s and insists that school buses are one of the safest forms of transportation on the road. In fact, NHTSA says, quote, there is insufficient reason for a federal mandate for seat belts on large school buses, end quote. NHTSA also says students riding in school buses are 8 times safer than those riding in cars these days.
And we've always heard that, but for some reason as a parent you always feel like if you're driving your child, they're safer than in a school bus, but just not the case.
Well, and every other vehicle has seat belts. Why not school buses? That's the question that always comes up.
So more at 5:30 and 6 on this.
That's right. At 5:30, we put the speed of buckling up to the test, just how quickly can preschoolers do it. And then tonight at 6, we ride along in a district where students wear lap shoulder belts right now and talk with the Ohio lawmaker who wants to make seat belts mandatory on Ohio school buses. We have also created a special digital section for this particular investigation. Go to WDTN.com right now to watch bonus video, vote in our poll, see interactive graphics, and see the database that shows what your superintendent or transportation director thinks about the idea of putting seat belts on your school buses.
Well, on to some other news now. A Clark County teenager is arrested today.
And welcome back. The staunchest critics of putting lap shoulder seatbelts on Ohio school buses say that buckling up delays evacuation in the case of crash or fire. So we decided to put that concern to the test. We went to a Centerville school where the youngsters learn about safety from an administrator who speaks from experience. What parent wouldn't lose sleep after seeing accidents like these? Imagine your son or daughter in their seat on their school bus, turned around talking to friends, texting, reading, daydreaming, unaware of the danger, unable to brace for what could be a lethal impact. At Goddard School in Centerville, students 6 and under who ride the bus already wear a lap belt. Owner Angela Norman wouldn't have it any other way.
I definitely would say that my children are safer on the safer here at the Goddard School by being on the bus with the seatbelt, and my personal children that are on the bus that are not buckled in.
The government sees it that way too, at least for small buses like the ones used by Goddard and hundreds of other schools. Since the late 1970s, it's required seatbelts on buses under 10,000 pounds, which are closer in size and weight to passenger vehicles. Today, it's a 2-point lap shoulder system. Next year, the standard becomes 3 points. But there are no such restraints required on the big yellow school buses. Instead, safety comes in the form of closely spaced, thickly padded high-back seats. They're designed to cushion the blow during a crash, something that troubles Norman.
Children are often on their knees in their seats, especially if there might be 3 children per seat. I know for a fact that 3 children cannot comfortably fit on a seat. So in the event there was some sort of accident, they've got half of one of their legs hanging off, they're automatically going to fly out into the aisle.
Crash tests we saw back up that belief. At its lab in Westfield, Indiana, IMMI showed us what happens to child-sized dummies who aren't buckled in when their bus hits a barrier head-on at just 30 miles an hour. The reality of this simulation brings back painful childhood memories for Norman.
I've actually been in a bus accident, and while I did not obviously have seat belts, I was hurt. My lip was bloodied, I had bruises all over my face, and we had to be rushed to the emergency room.
How often do children in school bus accidents end up in the ER? Well, that depends on whose numbers you look at. In 2009, the Transportation Research Board, a division of the National Research Council, reported an annual average of 6 fatalities and 5,500 injuries. However, a 2007 study at Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus put the injury average at 17,000 per year. Opponents of seatbelts always raise the issue of crime. Several superintendents we surveyed for this story said they would have to hire aides to help young children buckle up. So we did a quick test at Goddard. 3 times we timed just how long it took 5 preschoolers to get on the bus and put on their seatbelts. Thumbs up meant they were buckled in. The first time it took them more than a minute. On the second try, a significant improvement, 34 seconds, a time they shaved to just 24 seconds on the third try.
I do think that, it's just a matter of working with them and helping to teach them, that was a prime example.
Got to make sure we hear it click, huh?
Norman is sympathetic to objections about the cost of buying new buses equipped with belts. After all, Goddard is a for-profit school. But she believes parents would gladly pay a few dollars more in taxes or tuition to get some peace of mind.
Yes, there are some costs associated with that, but how do you put a value on the fact that a child could potentially lose their life? And I think that's what we're talking about here. If we have a major accident, really, I don't ever want to look a parent in the face and say, I'm sorry to tell you, Miss Williams, today we lost your child. There is no amount of money that would bring that child back.
But the reality is money is a big part of this conversation. Buying a new big bus with lap shoulder belts costs about $85,000 or about $7,500 more than those buses currently cost. It is also fair to point out that federal safety experts say they believe requiring lap shoulder belts on every school bus in America might save the life on average of only one more child.
Mark, in all of the calls that you made to transportation directors and superintendents, how often did the subject of cost actually come up?
Well, it did come up, Marcia. We posted a special database for this story at WDTN.com. It looks like this, and it includes the responses from 79 superintendents or transportation directors right here in the Dayton region. Cost was a key issue for more than 10% of them, but we were surprised by another big objection that was raised quite a number of times, the fact of students possibly using the buckles as belts as weapons on the bus. That one kind of caught us off guard.
Yeah, oh gosh, that is surprising. So we have more of this at 6.
Right. Coming up in half an hour, we will ride along with a bus in an Indiana district where the students buckle up each and every day right now. And you will hear from the state lawmaker here who wants to make that the law in Ohio.
Okay. Thank you, Mark, very much. Well, we're getting a ton of feedback, as you can well imagine, about this story on our social networking sites. Let's listen. Crystal Cantrell wrote, I would love for them to have seatbelts on all buses. I have to have my son buckled in my car. Why doesn't he have to be buckled in a school bus? Deb Miller Downey wrote, what? I saw a video of kids on a bus being thrown to the ceiling on the news. How can seatbelts do more harm than good? But Patty Illery Oliver, a veteran bus driver, wrote, imagine trying to free 50 to 80 students from jammed seatbelts in a collision. Look at the numbers of injuries on a school bus in Ohio. Collisions involving crashes with school buses. There are more injuries to those outside the bus than inside the bus. We'd like to hear from you. So go to the special section at WDTN.com. Weigh in, watch bonus videos, see for yourself. See those arguments on both sides of this issue.
Now, keep our critical human services. Vote for issue 9.
From WDTN, the station that's on your side. This is 2 News at 6.
Right now, Greene County prosecutors investigate the broken skull on an infant, taking a step back to move forward with this case. But first at 6 o'clock, the conclusion of an exclusive 2 News investigation. Should there be lap shoulder seatbelts on Ohio school buses? Good evening again. I'm Marsha Bonhart.
And I'm Mark Allen. Over the past hour now, we've laid out the arguments on both sides of this admittedly controversial issue. We take you now to a district just 2 hours from Dayton where you could make the case that buckling up not only saves lives, it changes them for the better. Bus accidents like this one are big news. From the air, you can see the impact. But if you watch a crash unfold from inside the bus, you get a whole different perspective on the chaos. This is a rollover simulation provided by IMMI. The Westfield, Indiana company is the world's largest maker of child restraint components and home to one of the most sophisticated crash test labs in the country. It's also the company that supplied this new bus to Heritage Christian School in Indianapolis. Now, Indiana does not have a law requiring lap shoulder belts on school buses, but Heritage Christian has been using them for 8 years anyway.
The last thing I want to do is to go to a hospital or, heaven forbid, a funeral home and say, we could have maybe protected your child. I want to sleep at night.
Ron Young is Human Resources Manager at Heritage Christian. When IMMI told Young it wanted to test seatbelts on the Heritage bus fleet, it did not take Young long to make up his mind.
I guess I looked at it as, what's the price of a kid's life? And I wanted to make sure that I could look at a parent and say, I made that decision because I wanted another brand new bus. No, we're all about the kids.
Today, Heritage has lap shoulder belts on all 8 of its buses. Now, Heritage can't buy new buses as often as it used to, and new ones cost $7,500 more than buses without belts, about $87,000. But transportation manager Miriam Goodman could not be happier.
We tell our kids that we love them. That's why we have the seatbelts. We love them, and we want to protect them, and we want to keep them safe because we treat them like our own.
Goodman has been to the IMMI lab. That's where she saw a simulation of a rollover crash, the kind of accident in which lap shoulder restraints may have real value.
If they have a rollover, those backpacks are going to go, psst, and the kids are going to be in their seat. You're not going to have backpacks and kids and hitting each other and hurting.
Here in Ohio, this now famous video of a Circleville bus rolling over is stoking debate about buses and seatbelts at the State House.
The children are like human missiles. They just fly across the school bus. So clearly, our buses are not safe in case of that kind of an accident. 68th
District Representative Kathleen Chandler has penned House Bill 448. It requires lap shoulder belts in every new or refurbished school bus by the year 2014. It does not require any district to retrofit their existing buses. It requires every Ohio school district to adopt a disciplinary policy for students who don't wear seatbelts. And it gives immunity from lawsuits to districts if students hurt in an accident did not have their seatbelt fastened.
It seemed very strange that children are wearing seatbelts all of the time in their cars, even coming home from the hospital, and we didn't have them in schools.
Chandler is taking some heat. Last June, her bill passed unanimously out of committee. That happened the very day a Zanesville kindergartner died in a bus crash. But the bill has yet to come to a vote in the full House. Opponents argue the measure is too costly. The Ohio Legislative Service Commission estimates a single new bus equipped with lap shoulder belts might cost $15,000 more than it does now. Opponents also say districts will have to hire aides to get the children buckled in. Chandler disagrees.
I don't buy the idea that they need to walk the children to the seat and buckle them in. Kids learn how to handle those seat belt buckles when they're very young. They do it every day at home in their cars.
Go to the first available seat and buckle up.
At Heritage Christian, they use the buddy system. Older children help their younger peers buckle in, and the driver is there to help too. And Miriam Goodman says routes don't take any longer than they did before the students wore belts.
I really haven't had a time where I'd have to say, oh, I have to add 5 minutes to this stop because there's a large group of kids getting on and they need to buckle up. And so that it's the large group of kids getting on to sit down. And I would adjust the time because of that. It's never considering, how long is it going to take them to buckle up?
The speed of an evacuation is also a concern for critics. Several Dayton area transportation directors we surveyed for this story were fearful a fire on a bus with belts would trap students. It was one of the first concerns Goodman raised, a problem solved with training on how to use a simple seatbelt cutter safe enough to pass from student to student.
We take the belt itself that's wrapped around the kid, and it'll slice right through the buckle, just like this, and it'll slice right through.
Heritage touts one other byproduct of seatbelts, something they believe comforts every driver.
Once you have the seatbelts on, the bus driver can pay more attention to driving the bus instead of looking in the mirror and watching the kids and worrying about their safety. They're where they belong, in their seats.
In the end, the team at Heritage Christian and Representative Chandler are convinced the districts can find a way to pay for seatbelts on buses.
A child's life is so precious that how can we argue otherwise?
But Representative Chandler does not have much time left to get her bill to a vote. Her term in the State House ends this year.
So what are the odds that bill will actually come to a vote?
Well, really, Marcia, that's anybody's guess. A lot depends, quite frankly, on what happens in the election tomorrow. Now, Chandler's quest suffered a blow last week, though, when a 4-year study in Alabama concluded it was not cost-effective to put lap shoulder belts on the school buses there.
And how about the State Department of Education, Mark? What is that department saying?
Well, we tried. For the record, we asked the State Transportation Director to comment on this issue for us, but to this point, he has refused our request for an on-camera interview.
This is big, and you have done, as of this one, 3 stories. So do we get to see any more? Is it easy to cover everything with 3 stories?
No, it's not. That's why we've created a special web section at WDTN.com. You can access that 24/7. If you go there, you can see and read much more about seatbelts and school buses. There's also bonus video, interactive graphics, polls, and a special database that shows you what 79 of our area superintendents and transportation directors told us about this issue, and you can also blog and share your opinion.
All right. Thank you, Mark Allen.
You bet.
In other news tonight, a Clark County